My name is Momo, and I have never grown out of my 2010 Tumblr phase. And I make content about immersive experiences all around the world, but this is the start of a new series where I teach you how to get immersed at home. Just in time for no one to be home anymore. And we're going to start with an activity that has gotten me through quarantine. Dungeons and Dragons! So I'm a LARPer. You know, the kind of nerd that other nerds shove into the locker. But because live action roleplay requires you to be in a place with other people, not the most active hobby during quarantine. So myself and many other LARPers transferred to online LARPs, letter writing LARPs, and tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. I'm gonna wreck my voice if I keep doing that. Now, I don't know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons. That is not to say I am new. In fact, one of the first videos on this channel was me talking about my first time playing Dungeons and Dragons.
So this is my character sheet.
I'm just a bit of a dummy. Okay, so maybe I'm not a dummy, but I have always had difficulty wrapping my head around the game mechanics of D&D, which I was okay with, because the idea of doing math in order to play make-believe has never been appealing to me. Which is part of why I gravitated towards LARP, specifically the style of LARP that was very rules light and was kind of just a big ol' adult game of make-believe with no math. Hello. But now, in 2021, there are so many tools accessible to me that allow me to play D&D without worrying about the math. D&D Beyond is a lifesaver. I remember back in the olden days, the whole first session of D&D would just be you and your friends sitting around a table with a 300-page rulebook trying to figure out how to make a character, and I would just sit there with a pen and paper and cry. But D&D Beyond makes character creation feel more like a video game or a BuzzFeed quiz. You're just presented with a series of questions like, pick a class, pick a race, do you want this or that? Do you want that or this? Choose a number. Like, I can make a character in 5 minutes now. And then I feel like D&D Beyond just does everything for me and lays everything my character is capable of doing out in a really simple way. It's like, here's the things that you can do in a round of combat. Here's a spell you can cast, and check boxes for how many times you can cast it. Is your party taking a long rest? Just hit this button, and it's done. No math. Roll20 allows my DM Nox to present us with battle maps and visuals, so I'm not just trying to piece together an entire imaginary world in my head. And if you get the Chrome extension Beyond 20, you can just click buttons in D&D Beyond and it'll show up in Roll20. Make a charisma saving throw. Boop, cast this spell. Boop, do you want the entire description of said spell? Boop, and it automatically adds any modifiers, so no math! And listen, it's not that I'm bad at math. Like, I am bad at math, but it's not that's not the problem. It's that it was really hard for me to be immersed in a story or stay in character when I would see roll 4d6 plus 2 plus your spell modifier, and my brain would shut off because I'm so anxious about doing math. But now that I have all these tools available to me, I'm not only able to focus on the story and my character, but I'm also kind of wrapping my head around how D&D operates now. Like, I'm actually pretty excited for the next dungeon crawl. Like, I'd like to wreck shit. Please and thank you. But I still feel like by no means am I a D&D creator. God, if only we could hear from a D&D creator right now. Hello?
Hey, Momo, it's Ginny.
Oh, hey, Ginny. How'd you get the number for my banana phone?
Oh, I just looked it up in the fruit book. So I heard that you were trying to figure out how to really get immersed in your D&D games, and I thought I could give you some tips.
Oh my god, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
There are so many ways that you can immerse yourself in the feelings of a fantasy world. For example, I love having practical props and physical items, like maps and minis, of course, but also like drinking out of a goblet or a tankard instead of a cup, or writing with a quill pen when you take notes. If you're in a position to use mood lighting or add fantasy decor to your game room, that can be great. Of course, you can use music to add a dramatic soundtrack, but I also really like using soundscapes, like playing bird sounds when you're in the forest or cricket sounds at night. I am a big fan of lighting candles that smell outdoorsy or relate to the location or the season. And of course, themed food is fantastic. Drinks like mead or mulled wine, or tea and hot cider if you want to avoid alcohol. And food can be so much fun to combine with a game, whether that's as basic as bread and cheese and dried meats, or as involved as one of the recipes from the official D&D cookbook.
Thank you, Ginny. Those are all super great tips, and I think I have a lot to work with for the video now. Thanks. Where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, pretty much everywhere. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon. Just search for Ginny D and I should pop up.
Thanks, Ginny. Bye.
Bye. Whew. I hope nobody tells her that my group eats Cheetos and drinks LaCroix.
Oh my god, that was Ginny D. That was like the Ginny D. Oh my god.
One of my neighbors was definitely on my porch through the window watching me talk on a zucchini.
Okay, so now that we have the +5 wisdom of Ginny D under our belt, let's get started on making tomorrow's D&D session super immersive. So something I have learned while documenting immersive experiences for most of my adult life is you want to focus on hitting all of the 5 senses. So this is the format that this series is going to kind of be following. So we're going to be fitting things into each of these categories to try and make any given thing more immersive. Like, I'd really like to do like a full immersion Sea of Thieves or Lord of the Rings marathon in the future. It's basically just going to be like nerdy themed movie nights. And Ginny's already mentioned a bunch of them, so she's so smart. So the first sense we are going to be working with is taste. And when I asked people on Twitter, how do you get immersed for your D&D game, a lot of people said food, but a lot of the recommendations were like stews and roasts, which I have done. I'm not knocking it. But when I'm playing a game with my friends, not the most ideal time to be slurping on a soup or trying to enjoy a meal. I am a notorious D&D snacker. There have been many times where I've been recording my D&D podcast and I've had to edit out the crunch of a salt and vinegar chip. So I didn't want to make a meal, but I also wanted to make something that potentially my D&D character would eat. So going off Ginny's idea of meats and cheeses, we're gonna make a charcuterie board, which in the real world feels very bougie and yummy, but it's also easy to imagine your character eating meats and cheeses on the road, because I imagine a full meal would be like a special thing, like you'd have to set up a cook fire and stuff. So this is one of my favorite books. I'm actually rereading it right now, and I am just realizing it's a bit of an odd book to recommend during a full immersion Dungeons & Dragons video. It's called Adulting, How to Become a Grown-Up in 468 Easy-ish Steps. And it's actually full of a bunch of really helpful information that's written in a not at all pretentious way. Like the first chapter is like, hey, we're all faking it. It's unreasonable to expect yourself to follow every single tip in this book. Step 6, stop enjoying things ironically, just enjoy them. A list of weekly cleaning tasks. How to make mashed potatoes. How to ask for a promotion. When you're looking for an apartment, check and see how many outlets there are. Turn the shower on to make sure it doesn't feel like an old man peeing on you. She says, to make a proper adult cheese plate, you will need 1 soft cheese. Watch me butcher all of these cheese names. I don't know how I'm supposed to make an adult cheese plate if I cannot even pronounce the names of the cheese, such as Brie, Camembert, Roquefort, or Münster. 1 hard cheese, such as Pecorino, Manchego, or Emmentaler. 1 orange cheese, such as Cotswold, Gouda, or cheddar. Bread or crackers, and 1 accent, such as strawberries, olive, pickled asparagus, sauteed mushrooms, artichoke heart, etc. But we're gonna make more of a charcuterie board situation because I wanted to add some meats. I also got help from the charcuterie genius in my life, my mother, and she recommended picking up some hummus, and I also got some veggies to dip in the hummus. So we went to the grocery store, picked up some cheeses, picked up a convenient package of charcuterie meats. One of the cheeses I thought would just look cool on the plate, but it was like $8! Gonna be one fancy fantasy immersion road meal. I picked up some carrots with the green part still attached because it looks like I would eat it on a rainy road in Brie. Then I got some cucumbers, some grapes, and some apples. And I saw people on Pinterest were making meat flowers by just wrapping charcuterie meat around a champagne glass. So I tried it out. It was so easy and it looked so good. How's my dry? That is perfect! You're in charge of charcuterie. And I just arranged the cheeses and crackers around the hummus, and I'm actually really excited to eat this because I think it's gonna look really pretty. I think it's gonna taste really yummy and taste like something my character would eat. And it's gonna be really good for me, because it's a plate of veggies and meat and dip, and you know what, I don't know about cheese. I feel like I might have been lied to when I was told that dairy was one of the food groups. It's better than chips. So the next sense we're going to be dealing with is touch. And I'd like to direct you to a video from my friend the Azrai about ADHD in D&D, which might explain my experience with D&D thus far. Hey, Past Momo. So we had a doctor's appointment 2 days ago. We're now on Vivacine. I don't know how to pronounce it. But you do have ADHD, and yeah, it does explain your experience with D&D so far. A symptom of ADHD is not being able to process invisible information.
It has to do with our object permanence. We need things to be visual, in front of us, touchable if possible, and somehow for it not to blend in with the background over time.
And in it, he says he also gravitated towards LARPing because there was more physical representations for things.
I like to touch things. I'm asexual. If you make any weird jokes, I'm calling glad.
So Az is actually in my D&D game, and his character has a feat called Luck, which allows him to re-roll things. So he keeps a series of coins on his desk to remind him of how many times he's able to use that feat. And this is a good tip for people with ADHD, but I think it's also a good tip for anybody, just to have something physical in the real world that you can interact with to remind you of the resources you have available to you in the world of imagination. So whenever Momo is going through her character sheet trying to find what spell I can use, I'm always muttering to myself like, prestidigitation, cantrips, blah, blah, blah. And I'll always say it's like, Donna's looking through her cookbook. Because, you know, it makes it a little more immersive because it sounds like I'm going through a spell book. So my friend Fabienne commissioned for me a real version of my cookbook. So now I have something that I could actually flip through when I'm looking for a spell to cast. So a lot of people do that. They have like a D&D journal that they'll actually flip through to look at their skills and spells and stuff. But I think I'm gonna put Pinterest recipes in here because Doddle's spellbook is also a cookbook. If you're, it's like an inside joke between me and the people who are listening to Realms Apart. If you're not listening to Realms Apart, my D&D podcast, you like just won't get it. But something I wanted to get specifically for this video is my character has a pet chicken. Like every Disney princess has to have an animal companion, right? But I constantly forget that the chicken exists. Like we'll just be in a round of combat and then Nux, my DM, will be like, oh, your chicken runs past. And I'll be like, oh shit, Emerald, get out of the way. So I wanted to have a physical representation for my chicken so that I would always remember the chicken is there. So I first went to Amazon and looked up chicken toy, because that seems obvious, just to have like a stuffed animal version of my chicken. And I was delighted to see that at first the only things to come up were toys for chickens. Just a nice little dash of serotonin there. And then when I looked up chicken stuffed animal, I realized I am never going to use this. I know I give off the aura of someone that still keeps stuffed animals on their bed, but I don't. I'm very minimalistic. I like most things I own to have a use. So I thought, what if I found something to keep all of my D&D stuff in that looked like a chicken? So I looked up chicken bag, and this hideous beauty appeared to me. But I was like, oh, that's a little expensive. Maybe we can find something a little cheaper. So I just Googled chicken bag just to see if there were any cheaper alternatives. But what came up were articles about how much people loved this chicken bag in particular. So, just give me a sec. Dun, 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 dun. He's so dumb looking. I love him. So, we have a chicken bag, which is not only good for accessorizing, but when it's time for D&D, I can take out all my spell cards, my dice, and then I have a representation for my chicken. So I'll never forget you, Harold. So now we're moving on to sight. Lighting is very important. I don't know if you all are watching my podcast Realms Apart, but we use lighting to convey moods and locations. But that was made by Az. Me, myself, we don't have a great lighting situation right now, which is part of why I am sweltering at the moment. So we're gonna try and have like a black box effect. I've heard of like black box LARPs and black box theater, where it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a black box. You get the same kind of effect when you see a movie in the theater. It just eliminates any distractions so you can just focus on the story you're telling. So I'll often play D&D in the dark, maybe just by candlelight. So we're gonna try and do that because I am in a temporary living situation and do not have the resources available to me to make an entire fantasy set. Who am I? Ginny D? I am the poor man's Ginny D. But what I think is the most important thing in the site component of this video, character art. A lot of people ask me, it's like, will you ever do a cosplay of Goblin Dawdle? I did. It looked terrible. And I always tell people, if we were to make a live action Realms Apart, Dawdle would not be a human, they would be a puppet. Like, they would be Baby Yoda. Like, the ratios of my face were incorrect. Her eyes are bigger, her chin is smaller. They're not how I envisioned it in my head. So when we decided to make our private D&D game a podcast, we commissioned official character art. And if you have it in the budget, I would absolutely recommend getting art of your entire party in the same style, because it really helps you to envision essentially an animated movie of them in your head. Like, sometimes when we're playing Realms, I'll literally just be looking at our character art and not us, so I can visualize the voices coming out of the characters. And I feel like whatever artist you choose to commission is like the art director for whatever animated series is going on in your imagination. Like, do you want to imagine your campaign as a Disney movie, or a Steven Universe type cartoon, or a dark crystal gothic fantasy? Because when you have that visual representation for how you see your character in your head, it's really easy for you to imagine their lips moving. If you're looking for artists to commission, here are some artists that drew Dawdle. Dun, 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 dun. Art montage, look at all the artists who drew Dawdle. I will also put a link to a tweet I made asking for D&D artists in the description, so you can go through that thread and do some shopping in there as well. So for this series, I knew I wanted to put together outfits. I didn't know whether to put it in the touch or sight category, but I knew I wanted an excuse to put together an outfit. So ta-da! Here's a little doll outfit I put together. I didn't want to do a full costume because I like to be comfortable while I'm staring at a screen for a couple of hours trying to stay in character. Also, if I can just get myself like a cute piece of clothing that I can actually wear and isn't just gonna sit in a closet for potentially a year, sounds good to me. So I got this super cute, super comfortable brown dress from an Etsy store that I can't pronounce. Tsiomik Kids? They're from the Ukraine. But I would absolutely recommend. The quality is amazing. You can get it in so many different colors. Like, I'm saving up right now because I'd really like to get one in like a soft pink or something. It has pockets. Always a plus. Then I got this blue scarf from Azos, which was like really big and bulky, so I didn't really wear it as a scarf, but it worked well as a little blanket, which was very cozy, and the color scheme was there, which was all that was important. And I paired it with some little brown boots, which was very cute. It was very Anne with an E, very cottagecore. And I got some round rim glasses. And I think this does belong in the touch category, because I think it was very helpful that I was wearing round rim glasses, because I would remember, oh, Dawdle would constantly be pushing them up. And Dawdle is a goblin, which is not the most popular creature in large cities. So oftentimes when we walk into crowded areas, I'll say Dawdle puts her scarf up so that nobody can see she's a goblin. And not only would I have the physical sensation of the scarf being around my mouth, my fellow players would hear the muffled so I would sound like my character would sound with the scarf up. I have to remember to enunciate though. So yeah. Dawdle outfit. So now we're on to here, which is pretty obvious. D&D playlists, people. And I'm not talking about the character playlists that have songs with lyrics like Imagine Dragons and Fall Out Boy and Dear Evan Hansen. I'm talking about playlists that you can play during your game. You really gotta find the right playlist though, because I can't tell you how many times I've been watching a very serious scene, and so I find D&D Ambient on Spotify, and I'll be watching this beautiful roleplay scene, and then I'll just hear so you want to avoid music that's recognizable to you. Like on a lot of my D&D playlists, I'll have a lot of Dragon Age music because I've never played Dragon Age, so my brain doesn't recognize it as not the story I'm telling. So I've done some work here. I have made some D&D playlists for you in the description. And I've categorized them the same way that I do the music I use for Realms. So they'll be like suspense, tavern or city, sad, ambient, when you don't know what the mood is going to be yet. I also know Roll20 has the ability for you to play music through it. There's a Discord bot called Rhythm that allows you to play music in the Discord call. May I recommend a very cool website called Sirenscape that allows you to play sound effects during your sessions. All of the players download a player app, and the DM has a control panel that allows him to like favorite sounds and just click buttons and it'll play for all the players, which can be very tricky, especially during a fight scene. But there is a big difference between you're hit with a sword and you're hit with a sword. Like, it reminds me, oh right, my character is bleeding and hurting. And while these are all really cool tools for DMs, I'm a big fan of controlling my own music. Because for one, a DM is a very busy bee, and I think it's a lot to both be the director of a story and also a DJ at the exact same time. But also I have a lot more opportunity to just like hit skip on a song if it's not fitting the visuals that I see in my own head. So if you watch the Realms Apart live show, you can often see I'll have an earbud underneath my headphones so I can listen to Spotify. But also, what Jenny said earlier is true. Do not underestimate the power of simple ambient sound. It can be super immersive to be hearing what your character would be hearing at that time. When I worked as a professional event editor, we were taught to use as much on-site audio as possible, because that's how you suck an audience into the scene, is by letting them hear exactly what those people would be hearing. And it has the sound of silence effect where sometimes you just forget it's there because that is exactly what a scene would be sounding like. And because so often music is made to emulate a very specific emotion, it prevents the possibility of there being a disconnect. You know, like the... So may I recommend a YouTube channel called Sword Coast Soundscape. They have things like Generic Dungeon, Waterdeep, which is a city during the summer, underwater. I don't think they have ads on their videos, but you do want to be careful playing stuff from YouTube because it can be pretty immersive breaking to be listening to the sound of carts and carriages and people passing by, and then all of a sudden hear like Skillshare is the website where you can view videos. Something my DM Nox does, which is so cool, is he has a voice mod. Like if you're listening to Realms, most of those cool voice effects are done live. Like Nox can make his voice go very high or very low or make himself sound like a robot. And it really hits us in the gut when we're talking to someone and they're like, "Feel free to enter the caverns of Avernus if you dare." And then we're like, the mood has shifted, and we as players felt it. I think that's what you kind of want to look out for, is the concept of bleed. Bleed is a neutral but quite complex term, as has a whole old video dedicated to it. And what I mean by bleed as a neutral term is I mean it can be very bad, like a player being mad at another player and instead of communicating it, using their character as an excuse to scream at that other person. But it can also be very beneficial to getting you immersed. Like if your players are a little startled, it's going to be a lot easier for them to roleplay their characters being startled. But just to be clear, I am not encouraging you to frighten your players. Like, bleed really needs to be matched with a lot of monitoring, a lot of trust, a lot of communication. Like I said, it can be very good, but can also be very bad. Anyway, that was a weird tangent that wasn't on the script. Smell? And I think smell is a often overlooked area of immersive experiences because it is the most subtle of the senses. I think one of the organizers of the horror LARP that I documented a while back says it best. Cut back to an old video of mine where the music is far too high.
We wanted to use smells because it's a sense that is always fully engaged, but you don't notice it as much as like sight. Things like sound and scent, they unsettle you, but you're not always 100% realizing why.
Wow, such wisdom. Gonna talk about my favorite thing, candles! So I always light a candle when I'm playing D&D. It can help relax me, which is gonna make me more open to being in character. Nox often has us meditate before the game to help get into the mindset of our characters, but it also helps my brain associate that smell with adventure time. Like, you know how they say that you should chew gum while you're studying and then chew the same kind of gum while you're taking the test? It's the same kind of thing. But if my tip here was just light a candle, I don't know if that would make a great video, so we're gonna talk about a specific company. I am not sponsored by this company. They did send me a box of candles, but I am under no oath nor obligation to promote them. I just think they're neat. So the story of me and this company is I followed them first because I saw in their Instagram bio it said candles, and immersive experiences, which are two of my favorite things. And judging from the branding, it seems like they're making these candles for if you're having a movie night or if you're spending a night reading a book. And I've seen like D&D themed candles before, but these candles are specifically made to emulate the smell of a mood or location. Cut back to when I first filmed this video and it was entirely out of focus and I was smelling the candles for the first time. Creating more immersive experiences for fans of folklore and fantasy. I'm a fan of folklore and fantasy that likes immersive experiences. So see, in the little box is a little set. So like, you could buy this box if your characters were setting off on an arc that took place in the woods. So this one's called Enchanted Grove. Ooh, and it's very sweet smelling. It smells like berries. This one's called House of the Sealy King. I don't know what a Sealy King is. Ooh, I smell this one and it makes me think of like wax seals almost. Wait, it's not spelled like S-E-A-L. For a second I was like, the Sealy King? No, that'd be dumb. But yeah, that would make me think of like a Grand Hall or something. The Spriggan, I don't know what the Spriggan is. Is it like a monster? Ooh, this smells like pine trees. So honestly, I think this would be good for a fight. If I was picturing the fight, I'd picture like, you know, we hit the monster and he flies back and uproots a bunch of trees, and this is the smell that the trees falling back would produce. This one says Dwarven Forge, and then it says mood, sturdy hands mine precious gems inside the firelit forge under the mountains. Long hair, braided beards, and craftsmanship to last through the ages. Notes of earthy smoke, sandalwood, and amber. It does smell like, I mean, like, I've never been in an underground forge, but this would help me imagine an underground forge. Like, it smells very like earthy, if that makes sense. And it almost like has a slight tint of like a smoky smell. What was this one? Cave troll. Oh. I don't love this one, but I think that works. Yeah, it like smells like almost kind of sour. Like, I don't think I'd light this one before company was coming, you know? Like, it's not bad smelling, you know what I mean? It's not a normal candle smell. Welcome to the Tale-inspired sample pack. Lord of the Rings has been a huge inspiration and part of many of our lives. Each candle scent has been carefully crafted to represent a piece of this world with the hope and helping you create a more immersive reading or watching experience. So this one's called The Ranger, and I have always wanted to know what the Ranger smells like. Ooh. It's very sweet, but also very earthy. I thought it would smell fairer and feel fouler. Okay, I'm betting there's something in here that we can use for tomorrow. Okay, so right now our characters are in essentially like a shipyard. And I found one of these candles called Breeze Spice Market, because I picture there's tons of people in this shipyard like making food for each other and playing cards. So, now that we have covered the 5 senses, let's play some D&D.
There is a spark in the glowing embers of the hearth, casting an orange hue against the dark, aged wood. Currently, in front of that fire, sat in a lush chair, threadbare and worn, is an old man with a long, gray beard, but bright, quick eyes. He draws deeply upon a pipe. It's tightly packed with elderweir roots and rich-smelling tobacco. Now then, where was I?
That was probably the most immersed I've ever been in a game. For a little debrief, we went around the table at the end of the game and just said what our favorite moment was, what we're looking forward to in the future, and something we'd like to do differently. And I said, I usually have a list of like 50 things that I would have liked to have done differently, but this is the first time I didn't have anything to mention. That is most likely going to change once I edit that session. I'm sure I'll pick myself apart. I was able to utilize Harold more because I didn't forget about him. The charcuterie was delicious and very snackable. So, good old nerdy time. Thank you so much to the incredible Jenny D for contributing to this video. If you don't already know who they are, they regularly produce D&D content over on their channel, as well as other nerdy topics, and they're an incredible vocalist. Near the beginning of quarantine, we actually worked on an Animal Crossing fan song together, so that's on their channel. Thank you very much to my D&D group. You can find us anywhere at realms_apart, as well as streaming live on the Scabby Rooster Twitch channel. Thank you very much to my Patreons who make anything that you see on this channel possible through the power of coffee and Uber Eats. And thank you to you for making it all the way to the end of the video and helping me appease the algorithm gods. All right. See you next time, I guess.